Good morning. I see people are still coming in the room, so maybe we can wait for 2 more seconds. Excellent. So good morning all. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Julien Favier, and I work for the UN Water Convention in Geneva. I'm very glad to welcome you on behalf of all the conveners of this seminar series. And I want just to name them. So the OSCE, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France, Water Witness International, the World Bank, and UNEC, which I am part from. Obviously, we deeply thank them on behalf of my organization. So today's session is part of the SIWI Seminar Series that explore institutions for water, peace, and cooperation. As you know, it's made of 3 sessions. Yesterday's session focused on institutions managing water at the grassroots level. Today's session focuses on basin-level organization, and tomorrow we will go one step up and we will look at the global level. So yesterday, during the first session of the series, we've heard from grassroots voices. They are the ones dealing with the underground implementation of water cooperation. So in other words, they are at the really at the bottom of the institutional pyramid of water institution, but bear in mind that the bottom here is not, has no negative connotation at all. In fact, they are the foundation of the whole pyramid, so they are very, very important. So yesterday they shared their successes, their challenge, and several times they mentioned another category of organization, the second layer of the institutional pyramid, I mean the basin-level organizations. So even though water services are local, the institutions that facilitate water cooperation often cross countries' boundaries and feature diverging mandates, structures, sizes, and available resources, and we'll know much more about this today. So keeping in mind the challenges highlighted yesterday, we will now focus on transboundary water institutions today, particularly river, lake, and aquifer basin organizations. So during this session, we will explore the factors that contribute to their effectiveness in achieving and maintaining cooperation and ultimately peace. But before we do that, I would like us to take a very quick step back and look at the overall result of the 2023 reporting round of SDG Indicator 652. You've probably already heard about this indicator. It measures transboundary water cooperation by looking at the surface of the transboundary waters of a country covered by operational arrangements. But why is this relevant today? I mean, it's a very good question, because what we mean by operational arrangement, which is the very measure of the indicator, in many cases means the basin-level organization, the RBOs and others. So let's have a very quick look. As you can see on the slide, basically there is one very good news, is the level of engagement of countries. So during the 2023 reporting round, 129 countries have responded to the call to report on this particular indicator. And it's a very high number, because we usually consider that 153 countries share transboundary waters, so it's 129 out of 133, so that's a huge number. And it's a very good sign that countries are ready to report on this particular feature. The less good news, perhaps, is the level of progress since the previous reporting round. Oh, thank you. As you can see on the graph, in 2020, there were 24 countries that reported that 100% of their waters, of their transboundary waters, were covered by operational arrangements. And in 2023, this figure went to 26. So the level of progress is quite low. And if you see on the charts, the level of progress that is needed to reach the target in 2029, I mean, the gap is huge. So we have a lot of work to do. And I think that was a very quick look at the global level. And Sonia will talk a bit about this more tomorrow. And I'm trying to move my slide, and there is just one. So perhaps. Excellent. Thank you. I was told only one slide, but there was a very important information I wanted to share with you. Is during this reporting round, we've also asked countries to say a few things about joint bodies. So in other words, joint bodies also mean like regional basin organization. And I think here there are 2 very interesting information. First, and this is the information reported by countries. I want this to be very clear. First, the main achievements. So what do the joint bodies achieve? And what do the countries say they've achieved? It's stronger cooperation, it's technical cooperation, action of data and information, all very important pillars for transboundary cooperation and ultimately peace. On the negative sides, the main difficulties, the main challenges that countries reported on managing RBOs is, and you can see clearly that the main one is the lack of resources. Second comes the lack of information. So I think these are probably things we will hear today, but this is just to give you a flavor of the result that we received at the global level. So I'm done with my slide, and just one final comment before I give the floor to Nancy. So we know thanks to this 652 reporting that progress is needed. This is obvious. We know basin-level organizations are crucial to deliver as kingpins of transboundary cooperation. What is perhaps less known is that creating joint bodies is a core obligation of the UN Water Convention. So the Water Convention can help to bridge the gap that we've just highlighted through its legal and institutional frameworks. They include also key documents, and there are lots of documents around, but I think there's just one document I wanted to mention that is coming from the Water Convention. For today, I think it's very relevant. It's called the Principles for Effective Joint Bodies. It was released a few years ago, and I invite you to have a look at this one, because especially if you're managing an RBO or if you are thinking of establishing an RBO, this is something that is very important because it gathers wisdom from all over the world. So thank you very much for your time, and I will now call to the floor Nancy Eslick. She's the Global Water Coordinator for USID, and she will be our moderator for today. So thank you very much, Nancy, for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Julian, and welcome everyone. I'm so pleased to be here today and moderating this fantastic session on this important topic. To kick things off, I'd first like to invite our next speaker, Veronica Manfredi. Veronica is the Director for Zero Pollution and Green Cities and the Director General for Environment of the European Commission. So, Veronica, let me turn it over to you to give a brief presentation on the European Union Water Framework Directive as an example of the European Union institutional effort to address water cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. And again, many, many thanks to the organizers of this wonderful week, which is really allowing us to pull all the strings together. So let me tell you a little bit the history of what we have done in the European Union so far and where we are. Well, first of all, the point of departure is evident to this audience. I don't have to underline it. Actually, we take it for granted, but we all know that fresh water is the most finite resource we have on our blue planet. The planet is blue, but we have less than 1% of fresh waters across it. So a very, very finite resource that I think our ancient fathers understood extremely well. I'm proud to be myself a Mediterranean representative. If you travel across the Mediterranean, you will see incredible artwork done across the Mediterranean basins in order to treat water responsibly. So this notion of the finite character of the resource was very, very embedded in all the mentality across the European continent, but somehow, you know, we've done many crazy things as mankind. Over the last 40, 50 years, these had gone a little bit lost. The European Union that started legiferating on individual topics. So at a certain point in time, we had the directive on nitrates, still a very pressing challenge, I must say, across the European Union, because our farming practices are still not perfect, on drinking water, but somehow we lacked a framework that was pulling the strings together, and also, if I may say, creating a trajectory for ultimately where do we want to go together. And this is why, actually, it was back in 2000, so it was a realization of the late 90s. Back in 2000, eventually, the Commission proposed and the co-legislator agreed on the Water Framework Directive in order precisely to promote a logic of governance and deep collaboration across the very many parts of the European Union, where not only we have, all our rivers and lakes, of course, tend to be often cross-border across the member states, but you may also know that the European Union is the continent with the highest number of truly international river bodies. No less than 75 of our river basin districts are international in the sense that they imply cooperation from non-EU member states. So with the Water Framework Directive, we put in place a mechanism which is now requiring by law to all our member states to secure that when they draft their strategies, measures, plans in order to secure a good management of water, they do so in an inclusive manner, cooperating cross-border, but also involving the non-EU member states that are, of course, their riparian states. Now we have 24 years of experience with this piece of legislation, and yes, I can testify to the fact that it is a piece of law that, for how slow sometimes it may look to us in terms of delivering results, it has really created a climate of cooperation across the member states and, most relevant, non-EU member states that I'm sure is at the very heart of a spirit of water management that has enabled us still to drive progress. The directive per se sets a very ambitious objective. Back in 2000, all the member states were convinced we could have managed to achieve good status in dealing with all our freshwater resources by 2027. Well, right now, the department for which I'm in charge is in the process of assessing the national river basin management plans, which the member states have produced. They have to produce them every 6 years. So there is also a cycle through which member states must every 6 years report all this data. You might have seen in the graph that Julien presented to us just a minute ago how much this reliability of the information is super important. I can tell you that we know for a fact that in many parts of the European Union, it will be extremely difficult, if not basically impossible, to achieve this goal of getting this good water management by 2027. So in this respect, there is a failure, I would say. But aren't we doing an enormous progress actually in understanding why we are not making this progress? And also in understanding at every cycle better what are the problems behind. One among many problems, chemical pollution. At every cycle, the member states have been better fine-tuning the understanding of which are the kind of pollutants which are then even at the origin of certain failure of reaching good status of our super, super precious groundwaters. You may know that the biggest chunk of drinking water across the EU comes from groundwater, so you can imagine what an important resource this is. At every cycle, we understand better, and at every cycle, we are therefore then able also to take, I would say, source legislation that enables us to take action. You may know a problem that is worrying us very, very much across the EU right now is PFAS, on which we are still not at the stage of taking the source measure we should, but certainly the knowledge gathered from the water field is driving increasingly also the chemical agenda, and I hope we will see indeed very determined action here. But pesticides, many of the pesticides we used to use in the European Union back in the 60s, 70s, because of the knowledge gathered also through the water acquis, have been progressively banned and phased out. So a very, very important driver of knowledge. Also, I would like to underline the particularly exemplary cooperation that we see in certain of these international river basins. And maybe two that are particularly close to our hearts are the Danube, where, as you can imagine, Ukraine is also part, and I must tell you, this is, again, a basin where we see that notwithstanding all the geopolitical hurdles that we are all witnessing, you continue to have an excellent cooperation with the relevant authorities. So water is a table for peace, dialogue, for conflict managing, for mapping information. Of course, it is one of those fora where we continue also to take note of what is happening also on the river as a result of the conflict which is ongoing. The Rhine is a very good example as well. There our non-member states are Switzerland and Liechtenstein, closer, of course, than others, but still, I mean, it's a very nice cradle of cooperation, and they've launched so many pilot projects which have been ultimately transposed also into wider European Union acquis, precisely because of the impressive degree of advancement they were been able to achieve. So yes, this is really, all in all, from a governance perspective, a very important lesson learned. In particular, I think we are pretty proud of the common implementation strategy, which is a specific forum we have created with all the experts on water across all the member states to dive deeper into all the problems that they face in the concrete management of water across their countries. But let's face it, this is also 24 years down the road, a moment where the European Union is asking itself a number of questions about this directive and wondering to what extent we are really making best use of the digital technologies that would allow us today to go so much faster in mapping a lot of problems, Earth observation data. We see a lot of untapped potential in many areas. So stay tuned, because as I said in the high-level session, we have announced the EU Water Resilience Strategy. Expect that strategy to look in a very holistic manner at all the acquis of the European Union on water. We are also concluding very important evaluation on the Bathing Water Directive and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive that are all very intimately intertwined with the Water Framework Directive. And I really hope that this college and this mandate will be able to be very bold in defining the trajectory that the entire European Union needs to deliver on this water resilience ambition by 2050. But we are on track. Thanks so much.
Thank you for that great presentation, Veronica. During today's session, we will have two panels. The first will focus on peace and conflict, discussing how institutions can act as agents of peace. The second panel will focus on finance and institutional structure, digging into how sustainable financing can support basin cooperation. I now would like to invite our first set of panelists to the stage as I introduce them. First, we have Anna Jelapau. She is the chair of the Working Group on Planning and Management at the Dniester Commission and a faculty lecturer at Moldova State University's Institute of Ecology and Geography. Thanks. Online, we have Mr. Vitaly Zuk. He is the head of the Division of Protection and Reproduction on Water Resources and Marine Ecosystems in the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine. Next, we have Maria Pastlova. She is the team leader of the Global Environmental Facility at the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, which supports integrated water resources management across OCTO member countries. And also online, we have Mr. Farah Ramali. He is the Executive Secretary of the Okavango River Basin Commission, where he is using his more than 20 years of experience in water resources and the water sector to support transboundary cooperation and joint management of the Cubano-Okavango River, which is shared between Angola, Botswana, and Namibia. So, to kick off this panel, I'm going to ask each of our panelists the same question. From your perspective, what makes institutions agents for peace? And if I might ask, when you answer, please give us examples from either your experience in your current organization or a past organization that dealt explicitly with basin-level cooperation. So first, I'll go to our guests in the room and then online. So I'd like to ask Anna first. From your perspective, what makes institutions agents for peace?
Thank you very much. So, as a representative of the Dniester Commission, of course, first of all, I would like to mention about the dialogue that we have in the Commission. The dialogue that let us understand the situation in Ukraine and in the Republic of Moldova about the Dniester River. So Dniester is a basin which is shared by two countries. So one is Ukraine, which managed somehow 75% of the basin, and usually is the upstream part, represent the upstream part of the basin, and the Republic of Moldova, which manages 25% of the basins and is downstream part. So in this condition, as you may know, downstream and upstream parts, so as usual, have some kind of conflicts. So in this regard, I want to mention that Dniester Commission is a perfect platform for dialogue and for cooperation between upstream and downstream countries in order to use sustainably the water resources and to protect overall the Dniester River basin. Of course, when we speak about the Dniester Commission, is a platform for dialogue and cooperation, also to prevent the problems that we face and to develop some kind of resolutions and find solutions for the problems that can be provided between upstream and downstream parts of the basin. Of course, we are young. We have only 7 years of activity, only for meetings. However, we already discussed many themes that are very important, like pollution from different sources, like lack of wastewater treatment plants or insufficient number of these wastewater treatment plants, tailing storages, like impacts on hydromorphological states of water bodies, like situation with the hydropower and plants, and of course climate change, which is a quite big issue, especially this couple of years. Of course, ecosystem and biodiversity losses is also one of the themes that we discuss. But we have already some kind of achievements, and this is very nice because in this couple of years we could achieve a very good important activities, and especially documents. One of these documents is transboundary diagnostic analysis of the whole basin, and after that we developed, and the government decided signed it, the strategic action program for 15 years, next 15 years, for the whole basin, not only for Moldova and Ukraine, but for all basin. And this is very nice and very good achievement for us. I should mention that these documents were the base of development of river basin management plans in Moldova and Ukraine. Of course, these achievements, plus to all, we have some kind of common website where we can estimate the water balance, and we can share the data on hydrometeorological elements. Of course, all these achievements are thanks to our partners and projects, GEF, UNEC, OEC, and of course UNDP. Sweden Embassy helps us a lot in performing these achievements. Dniester Commission actually works on the basis of working groups. And here, in these working groups, we have experts, and this is important, from both countries, and of course we have stakeholders and decision makers. Every group has such experts and expertise. So this makes activities of this working group to perform strong relationships, and especially to understand the problems from the upstream, and for those who are from the downstream, and to understand from the colleagues from the upstream to understand our problems which we face in the downstream. These working groups are formed for different problems, like monitoring, like information exchange, like management and planning, like ecosystems, biodiversity, emergencies, and which is more important, we have also a group for legal framework, which is also important to mention. Of course, the Dniester Commission faces a lot of challenges like lack of finance, lack and decreasing number of experts, including due to war. War is a new challenge for us, and we try to face. And for sure, we will continue activity and to face all the challenges that we have. Thank you for now.
Thank you so much. Maria, over to you. The same question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and very happy to be here at this panel. Intergovernmental institutions, in our view, play a crucial role for promoting peace as they facilitate constructive frameworks for cooperation, also promote regional processes and build trusting relationships and the achievement of common goals and concrete outputs, besides implementing the existing agreements, basin agreements. And I would like to bring some elements from our experience in the Amazon. As you know, this is a very large basin with more than 6 million square kilometers, and is shared by 8 countries. The basin also accounts for nearly 20% of the liquid fresh water in the planet. So there is Amazon Cooperation Treaty signed by the 8 countries, and 20 years after the treaty, the countries agreed to advance further in the cooperation with establishing the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization. And it took a few years more to establish its permanent secretariat, which is based in Brasilia. And from that point on, the cooperation among the countries really came into being and accelerated. And one of the most significant and first ways in which our institution promotes peace is, as my colleague mentioned, is through providing a platform from dialogue. In the Amazon, it refers of different levels. First, the diplomatic dialogue, as the ministries of foreign affairs are the focal points of the countries in the organization, but also a channel for technical dialogue, also a platform for meeting local actors and stakeholders and even indigenous communities and other traditional communities of the Amazon. This is the only platform from dialogue which is at the regional level at the Amazon, and where countries can bring the main common transboundary problems and address them. Also, through the organization, ACTO promotes sustainable and equitable management of water resources, which is essential to reduce potential tensions and sources of conflict in our basin. And an example of this, a process which really triggered this cooperation was the process of having a common shared vision from the Amazon, followed by a transboundary diagnostic analysis and a strategic action program. By this process, countries agreed on their priority problems, which the most pressing one in our region is water pollution, but the total of 9 problems. And now this strategic action program is being implementing and advancing and reducing pressures on resources, but also building a sense of a community and a sense of collaboration that moves from national to regional perspective and sees a basin as a whole and not only a sum of its parts. And very important other issue in this process is capacity building. As the countries of the Amazon have very different have many asymmetries between the countries, but also internally between the Amazon and not Amazon regions at the national level. So promoting awareness and change of perception on transboundary resources and creating a sense of an ownership of the basin as a whole has been very important in our basin. And it also involves literally capacity building through training programs and in cooperation, South-South cooperation with the Brazilian water agencies. More than 1,400 water professionals were trained. And we are also in a process of training water professionals in gender mainstreaming in all initiatives and activities in the Amazon. So far, the 8 countries have been participating in these training courses. Another point I'd like, well, finishing, I know we have so many things to share, is establishing regional operational frameworks and providing structure and clear processes for cooperation. And in this sense, it's now a challenge, but we are advancing in common protocols for monitoring water resources, both water quality and quantity monitoring. And in this sense, I'd like to make a link with global institutions and processes, as they help us make use and a reference of already existing indexes and parameters at the global level, which can be used at the basin level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I want to shift to one of our online panelists, to Vitaly from Ukraine.
Thank you for the invitation to this event. On the condition of more than 900 days of Russian military aggression and the presence of missiles and drones over our heads every night, Ukrainians have a pressure attitude to the world peace. However, speaking about the resolution of water conflicts and the mediation of the Dniester River basin, it is difficult to overestimate the importance of the Dniester Commission in solving acute issues. The experience of the Commission's work is small. So far, the Commission has held its 4th meeting. But it is obvious that the two sides are trying to find mutually acceptable solutions. As an example, could be used the rules for the operation of reservoirs of the Dniester complex hydroelectric complex, which were updated by Ukraine, submitted for approval to the Republic of Moldova, and approved by the Ministry of Environment. The rules guaranteed the water flow downstream the hydroelectric complex on the level higher than 100 cubic meters per second, regardless the weather conditions. Avoidance of floods, especially high and catastrophic ones, also take place in conditions of mutual information and close cooperation, which allows to significantly reduce the risks of damage to both Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova. The Dniester Commission organizes annual meetings and provides hearing and decision-making on cooperation in the two maintained formats. Within the framework of the Commission, 5 working groups were formed, which are accountable to the commissions. Working groups organize and hold their separate meetings. Within the framework of the Agreement on Cooperation on Transborder Waters, annual meetings and held, which are separate events. independent of the meetings of the Dniester Commission. The GEF, UNDP, OSCE, UNICEF project promotion of cross-border cooperation and integrated water resources management in the Dniester River Basin was implemented during the period from July 2017 to May 2021 and included 3 keys implementing components and 13 tasks divided into components. We have no doubt that the work of the Commission will allow us to continue solving in the issues of water flow regulation, preservation of biological diversity in the Dniester Basin, and other important problems, including the preparation of joint river basin management plan for the Dniester River Basin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'd like to shift now to our last online participants, Farah. Do we have Farah on Zoom? Fantastic, thank you.
So I'm on Zoom, and my name is Pera Ramwedi. I'm from the Okavango River Basin Water Commission. Indeed, I'll give you a bit of an example from our basin. And this, I'll start off by giving a background to the region where I come from. The Southern African Development Community has among its 12 continental member states sharing 15 river basins. And therefore, the river basin I come from, the Okavango River Basin, is one of those 15. And our cooperation in this region is anchored on the overall cooperation of the states, and the 3 states who are members of SADC are therefore taking their cooperation on water based on this instrument, the treaty that was signed by the then 16 countries. And OCACOM is a commission established by the 3 states of Angola, Botswana, and Namibia, and has for this established this through an agreement that was signed in 1994, which means we are now 30 years old as a commission, and we have been doing our work to try and be agents of peace. And what makes us possible to do this? The platform which is afforded by OCACOM as a commission, especially with its structure, which at the apex you have the Forum of Ministers, followed by the Council of Commissioners, followed by the Steering Committee of Technical People and Specialized Technical Committees, offers us a platform for communication and relationship building, which then avoid misunderstanding and perceptions that might come when countries or parties are doing things unilaterally. It also affords an opportunity for confidence building and trust. OCACOM, during its lifespan of starting in 1994 up to now, has been able to create a sense of ownership, a sense of confidence and trust among the 3 states through a number of initiatives, including the development of a joint program through what we term the transboundary diagnostic analysis study that they undertook, based on which they then developed a strategic action program with a number of agreed initiatives that the 3 countries are doing. This helps in making sure that as they partake in this shared water course, they are doing it with a clear agreement and understanding of what priorities for each of the state is, and therefore avoid any undue conflict that might arise if others don't do this. It also gives an opportunity for joint planning and implementation, hence the joint projects and programs. We also can cite as an example joint monitoring that the 3 states embarked on in the last 5 years. And this is a very useful arrangement where the country's experts can start from the source to the sink or the bottom of the river or the delta, where they each use their own systems collectively to monitor and gather information that they can wholly agree to, which in the absence of a commission like this or an organization like this would not be possible, which would entail each country doing their monitoring, engaging on its own. And to bolster this also, the three countries have developed what we call a decision support system with a joint monitoring as a backdrop or a background to this, where the countries are able to collect information coming from the various nodes in the basin to ensure that that information is processed and synthesized to come up with information that can be used to make decisions scientifically informed so that they are able to do this. This is possible because we have a basin commission, and this gives them the opportunity, therefore, to have a shared vision, shared knowledge, and shared benefits. Talking of benefits, OCACOM, with the support of our partners, in this case, UNECE, in around 2017, 2018, they did undertake an assessment of benefits of cooperation in the basin. And among others, one of the areas of benefits is peace and security. And this comes with issues relating to avoidance of conflict, which if countries are able to talk around the table, they will discuss any issue amongst them and reach consensus that will then make them avoid misunderstanding and misinterpretation of others' intentions and therefore avoid conflict. This piece also includes increased collaboration in other aspects outside of the water sector, including anti-poaching and border control, support from the three countries as what parts of the basin have been earmarked as World Heritage Sites, and the declaration was supported by the three countries. The Delta, as we know, is one of the Ramsar sites of international importance, and it's 1,000 UNESCO World Heritage Site. This was possible because the three countries, looking at the basin as a whole, were able to support the Botswana listing the Delta in UNESCO and Ramsar through this exercise. There are also areas and opportunities for cultural exchange, which builds peace and promotes collaboration between the states. There are agreements about the shared vision and shared identity, which the countries over time have been able to undertake and share. And this increase security and this also security, for instance, for emergencies, wherein through the decision support system and its platform, we are able to do early warning for floods and droughts, which makes it possible for countries to anticipate and therefore prepare accordingly for impacts that might come as a result of floods. Now, other benefits.
Thank you so much, Farah. I think that I want to do a little bit of a wrap up so that I can make sure I can ask all of you a quick last sentence question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that has been really interesting about this week in Stockholm with World Water Week is the three-part SIWI Seminar Series. And yesterday, we heard from organizations working on the ground to prevent and resolve water conflict and water insecurity from Africa, from Asia, from South America. They provided compelling examples to show how water conflicts arise where institutional frameworks are weak or perhaps not implemented. They pinpointed several challenges that are highlighted here, and I'm going to list through the top 6. First, the lack of data for evidence-based decision-making. The lack of inclusive governance for addressing water resource management. Failure to see water security as national security. Strong leadership, but with gaps in implementation and/or enforcement. Lack of cross-cultural coordination between sectors, both horizontally and vertically. And finally, the unacknowledged role of international trade in promoting unsustainable water extraction, including groundwater. The opening session also provided examples of where greater transparency, reliable knowledge, and greater participation can help strengthen institutional performance and help water become an instrument for peace. So I'm going to ask our panelists in one sentence each the following question. So I'm going to give you a moment to think about your one sentence. And we're going to start online with Farah. Farah, thank you. I don't know, the Zoom folks, there we go. So, how has your organization worked to address these challenges in one sentence? You could have two,
Well,
that's it.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, the countries have managed to address these challenges through establishing joint management approaches and agreements.
Fantastic. Over to you, Vitaly. Fantastic. We're just connecting with him in Ukraine.
I think I can answer for both.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's move to you, Anna.
Yeah. So, if I may, so when we speak about Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova in the context of accession to the European Union, we have to harmonize the legislation. And in context of legislation in water, so Water Frame Directive is the base. I want to mention that in Moldova and Ukraine, next month will be approved the first river basin management plan in Ukraine, and in Moldova we will approve second cycle of river basin management plan. Fantastic. And in the Nestor Commission, especially in my working group, we speak about all the components of these plans in Moldova in Ukraine in order to develop a common river basin management plan. And I really hope we will manage to do this in next years. Thank you.
Vitaly, we were back to you. What's your one sentence?
First, I would like to inform the participants of the sessions that Ukraine prepared the guidance for the implementation of the principles of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, on water governance, containing description of existing in Ukraine gaps. English version of the document is published on the website of the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Nature Resources of Ukraine. On the aim of acceptance by Ukrainian government of river basin management plans, we faced the problem of adequate.
Okay. I think we're having
I'm sorry, I'm in the working.
I think we are. I'm going to give Maria the last sentence.
Thank you. Well, we have been addressing, and these challenges are common for us, also acting at all levels, starting for highest political level at the presidential summit last year, going through the technical level of meeting of water professionals and all stakeholders in the basin, and also involving local communities and local stakeholders.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for our first panel. Thank you. Okay. So I would like to now turn to our next panel for this session and invite the panelists to join me on stage. We have just heard about the role of basin organizations in promoting and protecting peace through cooperation over water resources. Now, we want to examine the structures of these institutions, how they are or they are not resourced, and how they interact with other institutions locally. On our second panel today, we'll focus on the ingredients for a successful institution. That includes structure, accountability, and financing. So first, I would like to have that down now. Invite Dr. Sharon Megdal to the stage. Come on. She is the Director of Water Resources, the Research Center at the University of Arizona, where she aims to bridge the academic, practitioner, and civil society communities. Next, I'd like to invite, these are not in order. There we go. Walter Chinaway. Chinawa. Thank you. Who is with Water Witness International. He's the country team lead in Malawi, where he leads a team working across climate adaptation, water stewardship, and community engagement. Last, Dr. Anders Jogerskog is program manager of the I win a gold medal on that one. In the International Waters in African Trust Fund at the World Bank. Oh no, we're going back. There we go. He's also previously managed the UNDP Shared Waters Partnership. So I think, I'll go back here. Sharon.
Yes.
I'd like to start with you. The International Boundary and Water Commission, the IBWC, is an institute that oversees the Colorado River Basin, which is shared between the United States and Mexico. It's been operating for 75 years. Faced with reduced Colorado River flows, IBWC has successfully crafted cooperative approaches to transboundary river management. Can you share with us what factors you believe have been the most important in the ability of IBWC to effectively co-manage water resources? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that question, Nancy, and a pleasure to be here. And I may be a little bit different among the panelists here in that I'm an academician, and I do have a slide. It isn't a slide because I must have slides to give a presentation. It's a slide because I have a list of things. And rather than everybody wondering, what is she saying? I want the list. I asked for it to be put on a slide. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what's going on at the basin level in the southwestern part of the northern hemisphere, where the 7 states in the United States share a river with Mexico and 30 indigenous nations, First Nations. It's a river that's very, very stressed. As Nancy said, this is an organization that has been in existence for more than 75 years, but became a water commission over 75 years ago with a 1944 treaty dealing with 3 border rivers. And I've been working on the nexus of management and policy and trying to help people understand these complex issues. And so I had the opportunity, and I've been talking about the concept of wicked problems. We're dealing with major problems of reduced water, growth, competition, pollution, all those things. And so I had the opportunity to draft a case study for a handbook of water diplomacy that's coming out soon, not yet, but if anybody really is interested in this, I can give you an advance copy of the article. And so the case study that I wanted to write, and I am really appreciative, is one on the factors that contribute to successful water diplomacy. And this really has broad applicability, whether it's between countries, between cities, between communities. And some of these may be self-evident on this list to you, but I just want to go through them very briefly. We're very limited on time. The first one, it kind of goes without saying, but you have to say it. You have to have a functioning mechanism, not something that is just on paper that doesn't function. And there are examples of commissions and so forth that are just on paper and they don't function. You have to have trust. Trust has already been mentioned, and that comes from mutual respect. And so it's very hard to have a trusting relationship if the parties don't trust each other. Already mentioned, in fact, some of this is the obverse of that list of problems. It's kind of like, okay, this is how you overcome the problems. I can't say that they overcome the problems of insufficient resources, which pervades all this, but inclusive involvement of the interested parties, stakeholder engagement, involvement. Communication. You can't talk in acronyms, or you can't, and you have multiple languages, right? This commission has very good translation services all the time because part of the group speaks English, the other Spanish. We don't have the same units of measurement, right? In the United States, we're so weird. Persistence and patience. Sometimes it takes over and over again. And this commission, there's one commissioner for the US, one commissioner for Mexico. They're presidential appointees. They work through their state departments. And sometimes it looks very difficult, but they've worked together over time. Number 6, people really like eating with your partners. And that was said by somebody, those very words, when I said, what contributes to this kind of successful relationship on a panel at a conference? And with COVID, we couldn't eat with our partners. And if you didn't already know them, it became very difficult. And so this is something that's very important. And number 7 is leadership. You sometimes have to be very bold. Now, I do want to add, they're not up here, something has already come up, and it's not in my list for this case study. And again, people want to know more about it. I don't have enough time to tell you how the IBWC operates and how they relate to the treaty and how groundwater fits in or doesn't fit in. I do a lot of work on groundwater. But the issue of transparency, that's very important. And then the other thing that's important to successful outcomes is talking through those lessons learned, positive and negative, and learning from others. I had the opportunity to take prior commissioners, join them in a trip to the Middle East, and they met with counterparts there. And it was really interesting for them to hear of both the successes and maybe lack of success. So this is just a glimpse of it, but I'd be happy to, as I said, share more information if people are interested. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to turn to Anders. At the World Bank, you're the focal point for transboundary water. And you also manage the Cooperation in International Waters in Africa, or SIWI Trust Fund, which means I get to ask you about finance today. One of the items that's been raised in these conversations is the role that finance plays and the ability of institutions to do their work at the local as well as the basin level. What are the sustainable financing mechanisms of basin cooperation that you have seen work?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this event. And thank you, Sharon, for outlining those factors. I very much agree with all of them. But on financing, what sustainable financing has been a challenge. It is a challenge for transboundary water cooperation, particularly, I guess, in the developing world. But what I've seen, and the trust fund I'm managing, SIWA, in Africa, and we have some other trust funds as well. We've had one in South Asia. We have one running in Central Asia, CAWE, Central Asia Water and Energy Program. That provides project funding. But what we've seen and what we're encouraging is for countries who come together in an initiative, in an RBO, River Basin Organization, or Groundwater Organization, that there is a core contribution from the countries themselves. That doesn't necessarily cover a lot, but it does cover the core functions. That's not always there, and sometimes the ability to afford that from a national budget, which competes with health, transport, everything else, it needs to be prioritized in the budget. We've seen good development on that in some of the programs that we've been supporting in Africa, and that's sort of, it's not a condition from the World Bank, but it's an encouragement to move into that direction. We've seen that in the Nile, where the countries have increased their contributions to the joint institutions. We've seen it elsewhere as well. So I think that's one. There are also other examples where, and OMBS is a good example of this, where there is infrastructure jointly owned, which actually does generate revenue. And if you can find a way, and in a few instances, that's been the case where countries have come together, they have something that actually produces revenue for them, and thereby they can finance some of these activities in a sustainable manner. Those would be the key two ones. And then, of course, there is funding from development partners, etc. But you can question whether that's sustainable or not. So I'll leave it at those two that I mentioned.
Right. I'm going to take a second and go back to Sharon's list. And Anders, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question.
Sure.
I'd like you to directly link to the 7 factors that Sharon raised just a moment ago. Does the SIWI Trust Fund contribute to enabling these kinds of capacities in institutions so that they can be successful?
I want to say yes. And I think we do. So let me just run through them here. And I made a note in case you wouldn't put this up again. So I think at the core is that we're providing support for countries that come to us and ask for support, sets of countries, for functioning mechanisms, whether it's an institution, formal, informal. So we try to provide funding for that. And I think including knowledge production, it's actually co-production, I think is the key word here. That stakeholders from all the different countries come together and actually work together on knowledge production, which actually merges the perspectives of the different countries. I think that's a key thing. So, and yes, we do support that. Mutual respect, contributing to trust. I fully agree with this. This is something I think that builds over time. Sometimes countries come to us, ask for support. There may not be that much respect at the onset, but this also actually is linked to number 5, persistence and patience. If the World Bank engages, we want to do that with the long-term view, and that's not 3 years, that's not 5 years, that's a decade or longer. And we have examples of where we've been engaged for decades, because sometimes or often that's what's needed. Cooperation is 1 step forward, sometimes 2 steps back. And if it's 2 steps back, it's not a reason for us not to continue engaging. So I think that's a key thing, and that over time builds respect. And I think also the sort of joint co-production of knowledge, where technical people come together and actually develop this together. I get respect for you because I see your technical knowledge, and hopefully you will see mine as well, and we can meet at that technical level. I'm taking too long.
What about number 6?
What about number 6? Exactly, I do want to get.
Highlight here.
Yes. Yeah. So I've been fortunate to be part of some negotiations over transboundary waters, more as an observer. What I've seen is that while it might be positions being challenged and so on and so forth in the room, when you go out to coffee, when you go out to the lunch, you can have these. You can ease the tension a bit. You can have those discussions that you may not have in the room between differing perspectives. And having coffee, having dinners, having lunches together is actually something that I think is underrated. So I was very glad when I saw that you brought that up, Sharon, because I think it's probably more important than some of the other stuff that we believe are perhaps the most important.
I would agree. I think number 6 is about building relationships.
Yeah.
I think we all in this room can agree that we have been able to create bigger bonds and understanding when we build those relationships.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much. I want to turn to Walter.
Okay.
Based on your experience in Malawi, can you share some examples of the importance of collective action and water stewardship for institutional performance at basin scale, and reflect on the role of civil society?
Right. Thank you so much for that question, and my pleasure to be here and also share some experiences that I've got from Malawi. So from our perspective in terms of collective action and water stewardship in Malawi, we think that everyone has a responsibility to commit and support basin management. So now this is all to focus on systems, a mechanism to ensure that institutions are delivering on their mandates and are being held accountable. So now in an ideal situation, you think that everything works out, but that's not normally the case. So I would want to share just 2 examples. The first one being in a very positive light. We had engaged small tea farmer growers in Malawi, took them through an empowering session of water stewardship so that they can understand the sort of service they need to be getting from basin institutions. But that was always a problem because they would not access the service because the basin did not have the resources to actually provide that service. And through some stakeholder engagement, we were able to put them together in one room to discuss the issues and how best to develop an action plan to address their challenges. Sorry, I had a lot of notes, so I'll try to go through them. And yeah, so however, that's not always the case. Sometimes things don't work. And we've got a very sad situation where gaps in enforcement and lack of inclusive governance has failed, where you have one entity trying to address and build their resilience towards climate change. And because of that, they built a dike which exacerbated flow flooding that wiped out about 500 households. And that's just creating a situation where you know that people, if they're not bringing about an interactive and inclusive approach in terms of institutions managing basin challenges, that would be, someone will be left behind or someone will be exposed. So yeah, that has been the challenge that we've been facing. But in my experience, I've felt that CSOs have not always been acknowledged in basin management, and they play a huge role, sort of like pioneers of giving the voice to the communities, especially the vulnerable ones, drivers of change, as well as promoting stakeholder engagement, which we're actually trying to do. And I'll be happy to share that this is one of the things that we're going to be doing with our recent program, Fair Water Footprints Program, which Malawi has a signatory to the Declaration of Fair Water Footprints. So we're going to be working with governments, corporates, private sectors, banks, to ensure that we strengthen, but also we share lessons like the ones that I've just shared just now, in terms of having a collective action in addressing basin issues. So this is going to be a FCDO-funded program that's under the Just Transitions for Water Security program. So we're quite excited to actually make sure that we are bringing about this collective sense in terms of addressing issues, but also adding a water stewardship content to it. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing, Walter. I really appreciate it. I want to see you right now in the room and give a chance if there are any questions. We also have online a little bit of a Mentimeter. But first, I want to just see in the room if we've got any questions about transboundary basin cooperation. Let's go right here. If you could say your name and the organization you're from, that'd be great. I think we have some mics in the room.
Yeah, they do for the Zoom. They need them.
For the Zoom, we do need it. Where did those mics go? Fantastic, thank you. So your name, your organization, and the quick question, thank you.
My name is Aitano. I am working for the Dutch Embassy in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And I think it's very interesting to see these factors that contribute to the successful transboundary outcomes. I really like the trust one, but you know, I'm from Ethiopia, and we have the Nile issue that we deal with, not at the embassy level, but at personal level. Every citizen is about it. So how can we bring that trust? Is really, you know, it's very difficult to deal with. So can you tell us a bit about how to get that trust? How did you bring it in between Mexico and, okay, relatively simple because US and 2 countries, but we have 11 countries, but the most intense one is 2-3 countries. So how can we bring that trust? How can you deal with
If I could answer that question, I would feel really happy.
Sharon, I would love for you to answer that question.
No, that is a great question. It is very, very hard to build that trust, and trust is easily shattered. I mean, so you could work over a very long period of time. And so I don't know if I have any of my indigenous colleagues from the Colorado River Basin in the room here. we've been traveling together and talking a lot. And in the Colorado River Basin, I mentioned we have 30 First Nations, Indigenous Nations, Native Nations, whatever word you use. We have 7 states, we have the 2 countries. And actually, sometimes the problems are more within the country than between the countries. And there's been lack of trust in the process, lack of consultation, and so forth. And so it's something I think you just have to work at over time. I'm just giving you, I don't have the magic recipe for this, but what I've observed, and the words that I keep hearing from Indigenous peoples is listen. You have to listen to each other, and you have to keep your ears open. And sometimes people are just closed off, and you have to learn. There's a lot of just lack of understanding, and so people have to demonstrate that they are listening to each other and they care about each other, and then that's the respect that builds trust. But I wish there were a recipe for it. I think we all could list things that we know don't work for that. So that's about the best I can do.
Thanks, Sharon. And I wondered whether our colleague from the Okavango River Basin Commission was still online, and we might be able to get his perspective also on this transboundary water issue. If we could go to the Zoom, please.
Well, I am still online, and I think it's a very important aspect of this trust building. And as I indicated in my previous intervention, it stems off from a number of things. One, doing things together, but also building the necessary confidence in the things that the countries involved do. In our case, for instance, this joint monitoring is a very important element. When OCACOM was established in 1994, Angola, which is at the top part of the basin in the upstream, was at the time embroiled in civil strife and therefore limited development. Hitherto, development has started happening in Angola. And if we did not have a platform like OCACOM, there are cases when there's water scarcity that the other states might feel that maybe Angola is damming the river upstream. But because they have a table to talk around and even go and visit these places, it becomes a non-issue because they immediately establish that it's a normal cyclic event that is happening in the basin, either due to the climate change onset now or other things. So it's really very important. And person-to-person relationships are also very good because over time, as people talk across the table, they tend to develop relationships that they could pick up a phone and call each other and say, that river at that level, what is the situation there? And they are able to respond to each other immediately and resolve what would otherwise have led to a problem. So I definitely feel that strong institutions are very important to engender this level of security and safety, and of course, effectiveness of the institutions that we are establishing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those insights about Southern Africa basin cooperation. If we could put the Mentimeter questions up, that'd be great. And I think maybe we have one, maybe 2 more questions we can do. I'm just taking a full look at the whole room. Go ahead. Let's hear from you, sir. And if you could state your name and your organization, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. I'm Khalil from Jordan. And thanks for all the panelists for this rich presentation about the cooperation of the transboundary water. Here I'm totally agree with the 7 factors which have been discussed by the panelists, but I'm wonder if these factors has or should has a prerequisite in order to catalyzing the cooperation and shared water. What does I mean by this? In the essence, there should be fair share within the agreements between the countries itself. And after that, I think to enhance the cooperation between the shared countries all of these factors could be worked in a well-proper manner. But my question for Dr. Sharon, it does depend on the fair share, or after the fair share we can use all of these factors to consider or to be considered as catalyzing the cooperation between the riparian countries. Thank you.
So thank you for that very difficult question as well. So the issue of fair sharing, that's a very tough issue, right? And I'm familiar with some of the circumstances in your region. And treaties are done. You know, we have in the US and Mexico, there's a treaty. And I will say that it seems to work better between the countries on the part of the Colorado River portion of the treaty than it does. We have an expert here on the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, because the circumstances are different, how the river runs and so forth. And it's a never-ending kind of quest to work through, especially sharing when there's even less water to share than you started with. And that's the circumstances we're dealing with. It's hard to renegotiate things. And we have issues in my very state. I live in the state of Arizona, and I'll just give you an example. We've had court decisions that have said, okay, this is what it's going to be, but there's going to be an effort to look to augment supplies. And we in Arizona say they've never done the effort to augment supplies. And so we're dealing with this less water situation. And so I guess you have to look at things as kind of living situations. We've had people in our region, Mexico, agree to sharing of shortage when the treaty does not say, I don't think, I'm looking at my other expert here on the Mexico, that there had to be sharing of shortage. So I think people just have to always be talking to each other, and I think in your region that doesn't always happen, right? And look at ways to support each other. It's really tough. Again, I wish I had the answers. I'd probably be very famous if I did, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And I also just really want to take a second and thank the panel, the folks that asked great, provocative questions. And so just a big thank you to our panelists.
You should answer some of the questions.
Thank you so much. As we start to wrap up and think about today's sessions, I would like to invite up to the stage a co-rapporteur, and that is Akil Krichlo. Where's Akil? Come on up with me. He is the Assistant Research Officer at the Commonwealth, and he's going to share reflections. So I'm going to give a few, he's going to give a few, and then we're going to have a final wrap-up session. I also want to say I'm excited to share the stage with youth and to hear a different perspective, to maybe push our boundaries a little bit. So the two panels have covered a lot of ground. And so let me give a quick summary to what we heard today. The first panel, we heard about basin-level organizations that are critical actors for enabling peace and security through the management of water resources. We heard compelling stories and examples about how strong institutions work and how they need frameworks, data and evidence, and inclusive governance. We also heard about the challenges of failing to see water security as a national security issue, the lack of cross-cultural coordination, and gaps in enforcement, and how these all need innovative solutions that different organizations can use to address the issues. On the second panel, we heard about the structures of institutions and how they matter. For basin-level organizations to do their work, they also need to be appropriately resourced and held accountable. For example, we heard about how trust, communication, and inclusive involvement of stakeholders, including sharing a meal, are important factors for the International Boundary and Water Commission to craft cooperative approaches to managing the shared Colorado River. We also heard examples about what types of sustainable financing mechanisms work and how funders can have their capacity expanded. And from Malawi, we learned about how important engagement is with civil society for collective action and for water stewardship at the basin scale. So, I work for USAID, I'm USAID's Global Water Coordinator, and it's been really provocative and thought-provoking for me to really just think about how USAID's investments work. And, some of our goals and how we work, and I'm gonna reinforce the team, is building resilience to water security and how we really need to have a holistic approach when we're dealing with stakeholders. We want to be able to assess and plan, and most importantly, implement collaborative actions so that across local, regional, and transboundary organizations, we can manage these resources in equitable, fair manners. So I've seen firsthand in my job how hard it is, and I really have a lot of appreciation for my colleagues in bringing together stakeholders to build institutions to address water insecurity, in particular across regions, as there is increased instability in the world. So I have a few more things to say, but I want to invite you.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, colleagues, for your brilliant interventions. Similar to Nancy, besides seeing it in, as a young professional, I also see it happening on the ground in my region, in the Caribbean. Colleagues have spoken about the gaps in terms of implementation, also the ingredients for success, as Sharon would have mentioned, where knowledge co-production and, that sort of cooperative action. And that has become even more crucial for our small island developing states and our vulnerable nations in the Commonwealth, because we are now seeing where our countries are constantly dealing with recurrent crises. And when you have countries, for example, this year, Hurricane Beryl, the earliest Category 5 hurricane to have developed in the Atlantic region in June in over 20 years, has flattened the entire island of Carriacou. So now you have islands that literally have no infrastructure. There's nothing left. But how do we still place water at a very high level in the agenda when these people don't even have a home anymore? And this is a perspective that the Commonwealth continues to carry as we coordinate our 56 member states, and 33 of them being such small states, through our Commonwealth Living Lands Charter, our recently launched program where we are trying to ease the burden for these countries, where we harmonize, as we mentioned before, the need to harmonize policies across these huge UN conventions. We have biodiversity, we have land degradation, we have climate, all of which have important water-related commitments. So through this charter, like Sharon said, eating with your partners, we're working with our member states, such as Malta, to really get our thematic working group on soil and water conservation up and running, where we're learning from Malta's experience as a small, dry island in the Mediterranean, and how those realities actually are mirrored across even our Caribbean small island states and our Pacific small island states, and really leveraging what they have done and sharing that knowledge with other countries. And this thinking is what will actually help our vulnerable states move forward in ensuring that water is always placed at that developmental agenda. And I just want to close with a common saying we have in Trinidad, that's where I'm from, and it goes as, one hand can't clap. And it basically means you cannot do everything by yourself. And this is what the small and vulnerable countries of the world are saying to our bigger brothers and sisters, that we cannot combat climate change, we cannot combat water degradation without all of us cooperating together. And that's really the theme of this seminar that we have been reiterating in each sentence, cooperation. And even though our countries might be different, we also have a lot of areas of synergy that we can leverage, and that we can actually make a change so that my generation and the generation after me won't be in a situation where the entire countries continue to be flattened, won't be in a situation where 90% of their GDPs, in the instance of Dominica in 2015, was wiped out from Tropical Storm Erica. So this is the Commonwealth's perspective, and I'm excited to be working in an organization where I can work in a program that really seeks to carry forward the entire perspective of this seminar series. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you so much. I love that. You need 2 hands to clap. You also need 2 hands to shake hands.
Thank you.
I have just a few final thoughts. And that's really that water is foundational to global security, peace and stability, and also to development gains. So if we can prioritize water, we are also working towards climate adaptation, gender equality, workforce development, improved health outcomes, and so much more. So to achieve a water-secure world, we must have global political will to drive and accelerate progress. This is going to require a wholesale global effort to mobilize political commitments, financing, and accountability. Political prioritization and governance is critical at all levels: local, national, global, and transboundary. This includes pricing water appropriately, increasing budget allocations in the water sector, and on the international stage, ensuring that high-level political leadership drives attention and investment for a water-secure future. So I do want to thank everyone today. We have one final closing, and I'd like to invite from the French Ministry of European and Foreign Affairs, Franny Konix, to close the session today, but thank you so much to our audience and all of our panelists.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks to all the speakers that contribute to today's discussions. I will try to be short because we had so many impactful examples, and we have learned about the unique role of the EU Water Framework Directive. We have learned about the very diverse experience from the Disney Commission, the Amazon Treaty of Cooperation Organization, the Cubango-Kavango River Basin Organization. And the insight from those regions were incredibly meaningful to understand how, despite conflict, diverse interests, shared challenges, this organization enabled dialogues at technical and political levels and plays a concrete role for peace and stability through confidence, information sharing, and common understanding and priorities. Then the second panel brought us to, in concrete terms, understand how such basin-level cooperation can be implemented, structured and financed, looking at the realities from the field. This panel gave us a clear picture on how this regional institution can function and be strengthened through ownership and trust. A lot has been said and many examples could still be shared, as in the last years, the number of initiatives to support the development of such transboundary basin organization has grown drastically. I'm glad to say that France is also actively contributing to this growth. For instance, we have Team Europe initiatives aiming at supporting transboundary basin organization in Africa, and the first project supported by France is already running, supporting capacity building, synergies, and enhanced information systems with special technologies in 7 basins. I know other countries and development agencies are developing such partnerships, and transboundary basin organization capacities are growing in many places. France is also therefore very pleased to take over the presidency of the International Network for Basin Organization later this year at its General Assembly that will be held in Bordeaux in France from the 6th to the 10th of October. This network plays a great role in facilitating basin cooperation and dialogue and also just practice sharing, and its General Assembly will surely allow us to continue this discussion. But before we conclude our discussion today, let me invite you to join the last session of this seminar tomorrow at 9 a.m. It will be held in room 27 at level 2, where we will also continue this discussion looking at global institution for water cooperation. This first session will take stock from today and yesterday's discussion based on the challenged identified at the grassroots, the lack of data for evidence-based decision-making, the lack of inclusive governance and cross-sectoral coordination, the lack of political prioritization of water, the gaps in implementation, and the need to consider interlinkages between international trade and water extraction. And considering the work done by the Basin, this last session will explore answers provided by global institutions to these challenges. More specifically, it will look into the future perspective to strengthen the global framework and the benefits for water cooperation. With a first exchange on the existing and new tools in the UN system, through convention and the international law, and on the trade side, this session will then take us to examples from states making use of these tools. And then closing with reflection on the gaps in the global framework, the last session will provide us with a broader understanding on linkages between levels of cooperation for water and peace. I'm thrilled that several high-level speakers will be part of the discussion tomorrow, including Mrs. Barbara Pompili, Special Envoy for the French President for the One Water Summit, but also Mrs. Liana Kakobe-Chapota, Deputy Minister of Water of Malawi. So this session will be held in person only. We are looking forward to see you there tomorrow at 9 a.m. in room 27, level 2. Thank you very much and have a great day.